Hi, my name is Roger Boettcher. I'm the Traffic Signal Operations Control Specialist for the Oregon Department of Transportation. I'm here this afternoon to talk to you about a problem that we face in our society and within our company that affects all of us. I'm talking about suicide. The presentation that you're about to see is called S.O.S, a cry for help, not just another day in the office. Science of Suicide is a program designed to raise personal and corporate awareness of a condition that exists among us. This program will teach us some of the warning signs and conditions that may lead to someone that is in crisis. While there are no actual tools for hands-on rescue like you would find in first aid or CPR, this material will provide some of the insights that may help you identify and assist someone who is in crisis and may be thinking of ending their life. Please keep this in mind and know that always the best option is to listen, be compassionate and supportive, and call for help at 911 or assist a person to the nearest hospital if it is safe to do so. A simple act of kindness and empathy may be the difference that saves a life. Suicide is a preventable health issue that affects all of us, not only the people that have ended their lives, but also those who survive the loss of those deaths. In Oregon, suicide is the leading cause of death among our youth ages 10 through 24. This places Oregon among the highest in the nation. A recent news report on KATU Channel 2 in Portland revealed that this trend is on the rise.
Oregon is now 11th in the country for youth suicides. The state health department just released new numbers today showing suicide is now the leading cause of death for kids ages 10 to 24. K2's Catherine Kissel joins us live in News Control with a story tonight. Catherine, you talked with health experts about this. What are they saying tonight?
Well, Steve, unfortunately, they're not surprised. They say that this is another indication that as a society, we need to do better. To say the leading cause of death between 10 and 24-year-olds is suicide.
Yeah.
It sounds shocking.
It is shocking. And it's shocking that when you look at the numbers where even 5-6 years ago it was, 90 and now we're at 129. And what is going on? There's so much out there now, so much support. We've got Youth Line, we've got Lines for Life, we've got trainings and things like that, and yet we still have kids who feel alone and feel in that moment that that is the only solution for them.
Dr. Robin Henderson is the chief executive of behavioral health with Providence. She says despite efforts to support youth, they're still facing societal and school pressures that need to be addressed early on.
We have kids identifying with mental illness, kids with gender dysphoria, all those types of factors that we're not able to get kids access to care where they present.
The pressure's on now that suicide has surpassed unintentional deaths like overdoses and car crashes. Dr. Henderson says one reason it's number one is that more people are reporting it, which is an important step, but there's more.
Connection is the most important thing that we can do. When somebody's struggling, or even if they're just feeling alone, there's always somebody there to listen.
Dr. Henderson referenced 90 to 129. She was talking about 90 suicides in 2015 and 129 suicides in 2018. She says that this is a huge jump, and of course it's one of the reasons why suicide is now the leading cause of death in Oregon. We're live in News Control. Catherine Kissel, K2 News.
Catherine, thank you. It's always a good idea to write these numbers down and give them to your kids to program into their phones. It's the Youth Line number, 877-968-8491. It offers peer-to-peer counseling. They can also text teen to 839-863.
These stories fall too close to home for me, Roger Boettcher. My life has been forever changed by the death of 3 people by suicide. I lost my brother Randy, my best friend Andy, and a roommate, Dan. In the case of my brother Randy, the situation was never one that afforded the opportunity to intervene on his behalf. His death was one that came as a result of a situation that he was in, and it was as sudden as a car crash. I had no chance to save him as a result of those conditions. My best friend Andy, on the other hand, might have had a different outcome had I only known the signs. This is the point of this training, knowing the signs ahead of time, so that you are spared the hindsight of looking back and knowing you might have made a difference. I ran into Andy several years after our graduation from high school. I had finished playing in a softball game and the team was celebrating around a beer at a bar. I was excited to have run into Andy and was just so glad to see him that I completely missed that he was in a state of crisis. Looking back, knowing now what I didn't know then, the signs were clear. We parted company that night and went our separate ways. It was about 2 months later that I learned that my best friend had taken his own life. The news reports indicated that the police had come to his apartment with an eviction notice and found his body with a gunshot to the head. The report said that he had taken his own life approximately 45 days earlier, approximately the same time that we ran into each other. Andy was so alone that he remained undiscovered until they came to evict him from his home. I carry the guilt and the pain from each of these deaths, and not only from the loss, but from the feeling that I could have made a difference and done something. This is especially true in my friend Andy's case. Here are a few facts you should know about suicide and suicidal thoughts or actions. They are a complex, interactive, emotional condition that can affect anyone. It is the topic of conversation that no one wants to discuss, like the elephant in the room. However, we must start these conversations and break these stereotypes and taboos in order to better understand and help those in desperate need and solve this problem and stop this epidemic. Yes, this qualifies as an epidemic. The direct and indirect costs as a result of the condition are over $70 billion a year. The costs for medical care and insurance, as well as the cost for long-term care for those that have attempted and survived, and now require permanent care facilities. Over 47,000 lives are lost each year in the United States. That is a rate of 132 people per day, or one life every 11 minutes. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among our youth, ages 10 through 34 nationwide. Here in Oregon, suicide deaths are higher than accidental deaths from overdose or car crashes, and is the leading cause of death among our ages 10 through 24, and is on a constant rise. The Oregon Health Authority, OHA, has reviewed these statistics, and more information may be found at the links shown on this slide. 33% of all Americans know someone who has died as a result of suicide, and 9% say they have attempted suicide. Nearly 1/4 of all Americans have had suicidal thoughts at some point in their lives. Over the last 12 years, 2008 through 2020, the death rate by suicide has been 5 to 7 times those of homicide. These deaths are on a steady incline, with 2020 being the first time in over 12 years that the level has remained the same as the year prior. With such striking facts, it's hard to understand why news reports are not covering this tragic crisis better. Yet every time there is a shooting, there are reports that paint a tragic picture that we all become aware of and demand action to resolve. This tragic lack of coverage may be the reason these deaths go largely unnoticed, and why there are not more outcries for resolution of this condition. Prior to the months of late August and early September in 2020, suicide deaths outpaced those of COVID-19 in Oregon by 2 to 1. The number of suicides last year was over 5 times those of homicide. However, the media has failed to report the extreme severity of this situation and have overemphasized the violent deaths by homicide and those related to COVID-19. This fact has left this tragic situation largely unreported, and the extreme urgency of the situation passing without notice. Although the virus deaths surpassed those of suicide, 809 lives were lost last year due to suicide. It's time for the media to step up. For those interested in statistics and additional information, the links shown on this slide outline these deaths in more details.
So what do you think about these news reports that indicate New York has the lowest suicide rate per capita?
When looking at these figures, it can be misleading and seriously undervalued as to the severity of the totals. With headline news banners like the one you just spoke of, it can be misleading and can result in the dismissal of these deaths as not being significant. However, when you look at these deaths on a personal level or putting the evaluation into a local perspective, the actual numbers become staggering.
So what are some of the conditions that might lead someone into thinking about ending their own life?
There are far too many. Many are unknown to anyone but the person in crisis. However, there are some that are well known and documented. Luckily, there are ways to solve or diffuse those more common conditions. Please know up front that there will be those situations that will not result in a happy ending. There will be those situations that will result in tragedy regardless of the best efforts. It is up to you as a lifeline or rescuer to determine just how far you want to go. It is always easiest to call 911 or defer to those that are trained in a higher level or higher degree of rescue. It's truly an individual choice to become involved and will depend on your own feelings and level of connection to those who are in crisis.
Who is at risk of suicide?
Knowing who may be at risk is one of the first steps to solving this crisis. Anyone may face challenges in their life that will test their ability to cope. For many people, these challenges can easily be overcome. For others, the same problems may seem insurmountable, and they may find themselves in crisis, thinking about ending their life or attempting suicide. Suicide does not discriminate against any of its victims, but there are trends and groups of individuals that may be more susceptible to the effects of this condition. Tracking the trends and documenting the successful cases of suicide is easy. Knowing who is thinking of suicide is hard. The numbers are not well documented. One of the reasons for this lack of documentation is due to the taboos that surround the subject of suicide and the stereotype labels that are associated. When talking about suicide, most people associate the topic to being mentally ill, and as such, this has become a stereotype label that keeps people from freely seeking help when in crisis. I mean, who wants to be told they're mentally ill, or worse yet, crazy? We need to be breaking down these labels and understand the life that is at stake. Mental illness covers a vast array of conditions and scenarios, and while technically true and the party line, in the case of suicide, depression, or tendencies, it has resulted in a negative stereotype that may prevent a person in crisis from seeking help. It has also made it difficult for caregivers, such as yourself, to step up and help due to the thought that you're not qualified to assist someone in mental illness. A leave it to the professional attitude has become the normal response. This is all well and good, except for that there are far more people in crisis than there are professionals that are able to help. This is why we are suggesting breaking these flawed and failed scenarios and changing these conditions to a more proactive approach. The term mental illness is just too broad and too negative an image and covers far too much ground under the same negative umbrella. Life's challenges that are placed into our daily routine may not push us into thinking of ending our lives or lashing out at ourselves or others. Most of the time, we cope with these challenges and successfully overcome. However, the cumulative effect of these daily challenges or the situations can result in a condition that qualifies as mental illness under the same umbrella. These results may add up over time. As such, this may be a slow process that goes mainly unnoticed over time. Think about this the next time you find yourself getting angry and wanting to smash the driver of the car that just cut you off at the intersection. Ask yourself, do I feel mentally ill? The answer is most likely no. Yet this is one of the mental conditions that qualify as mental illness. For most people, this is short-lived and passes quickly. Not all are so lucky. For some, this is just one more stone in the basket they carry in their lives that adds to the weight of that basket. For some, the weight becomes too much. Reaching out and crying for help may come in many forms. It may be from actual words, please help, or it may just be reflected through subtle changes in mood or behavior. We need to be able to recognize the signs and listen to the cries for help, knowing that these cries might be a description of your child, your wife, your sister, or your brother, or perhaps a colleague or a friend. It also might be a description of yourself. Putting a name and a face or a relationship to the person in crisis makes it easier to become involved. And often we do, when we know the signs and the face of the person in need. However, this is still not enough, and more often than not, the signs of suicide go unnoticed, or we dismiss them. Thinking that this is just a passing situation may be a serious mistake. Thinking it will be overcome like every other day and all will be okay would not be an acceptable course of action if this were your child, your sister, or your wife, or another loved one. We need to take the same concern and attention for our family and apply it to those who we are not so familiar with, such as a colleague or even a stranger. We need to recognize that signs of suicide are a cry for help. Most people that are thinking of suicide don't really want to die. They just want to find a way to end their suffering and to retain their self-esteem and dignity. They most definitely don't want to be labeled. We need to look to the people and not the label, and to realize these are people that are hurting and need help to overcome and survive their current crisis. Dealing with the death of a loved one is painful under any circumstances. Coping with a death that is a result of suicide is far more difficult and more painful. The survivors that are left behind to deal with such a loss often find it easier to cope with this death by placing the label of mental illness as the cause of this death, thus softening the blow. Here too, this is a false label and is wrongly applied as a post-event method to provide justification and closure to those deaths. We need to stop using labels and stereotypes to provide closure and justification to what is actually just a human being that needed help to overcome their crisis. Whether you agree with the label or not is not relevant to the matter. The matter is that we are talking about people's lives that are in crisis and need our help. Every life matters and is deserving of our attention. Be aware of the signs not only in others but also within yourself. Remember that no one is immune, and it is impossible to save a drowning man if you can't swim. Know your own feelings before you look into someone else. You can always call 911 and seek immediate help for yourself and for others. Become familiar with the signs and symptoms of someone in crisis. The following slides will provide some more common clues that suicide may be on the mind. While the desire of this training will save all lives every time, and the goal of zero suicides may someday be a reality, it is understood that this may not happen. However, it is also the goal to bring awareness of this crisis into the light, in the hope that someday we will all care enough for each other to reach out a hand of support without the fear of reprisal or rejection, and that the person who is in crisis may feel freely able to seek the help that they need without fear of being locked up, rejected, or labeled as mentally ill or unstable. We should be able to seek and provide help with equal grace freely and openly. There are many conditions that may result in behavioral warning signs. These include, but are not limited to, depression, anxiety, loss of interest or focus, irritability or short-tempered or angry, shame or humiliation, or self-destructive acts. Additionally, changes in behavior such as relief or sudden improvement, closure of old issues or saying goodbye, changes in mood or behavior and actions such as a 180-degree mood swing. These may also be warning signs and should not be dismissed as just another day at the office or miraculous recovery. These may be signs that the person has actually reached a point of acceptance of their own death and is planning to carry out their suicide. There often may be clues in their actions or personal interactions with others. If they are talking about or discussing suicide in a way that is outside of a training or where the topic is being discussed, this is a big clue. Because of the normal taboo on the subject of suicide, it doesn't come up in normal conversations. Anytime this is outside of a specific conversation or a training such as this that we're going through today, it's a sign that someone may be thinking of or has suicide on their mind. Listen to what is being said. Statements like, "I just don't belong here," or "I wish I could just not be here anymore." These are definite clues that they are near or about to be in crisis. Don't ignore these or dismiss these as just talk. All too often, this is just a way of crying out for help. However, it may also be the last efforts of a desperate person about to end their life. Do not dismiss these even when they are passed off as just kidding. They may not be. For most people, being labeled as insane or mentally ill carries such a stigmatism that they will not feel that they can ask for help or tell anyone that they are thinking of killing themselves. The fear of being locked up or being labeled as crazy becomes more of a threat to them than ending their own life. The stigmatism of the label can actually drive them into suicide without ever reaching out for help. Here again, this is why we need to break the pattern of the labels and embrace the person. Talk about suicide as an off-the-cuff conversation is not natural. The subject is not often one discussed in normal casual conversations. The statements of hopelessness or acts that express hopelessness, such as crying excessively, may be more than just a bad day. Statements like, "I have no reason to live or even be here anymore," or "You don't have to worry about me, I'll be fine," or even "I just don't want to be a burden on you," are very common. These may just be a way to save face and embarrassment on their part. Reaching out for help is hard, and it's a scary proposition for the person in crisis. Pride, fear of rejection, and fear of reprisals for having stated that they wanted to kill themselves are all factors that make seeking help difficult. Don't just dismiss these statements as being okay. It's a good bet they are attempting to reach out to you in the hope that you will listen, that you will let them talk. Take the time to let them talk, unload their burdens, listen, and be compassionate. Let them be a burden. It's a small price to pay for saving a life. Recently, I heard a story of one such scenario where the perfect stranger, a young woman, wrote a letter to James Doohan, Mr. Scott from Star Trek. In the letter, the young woman explained her situation and indicated that she is planning to end her life. James did not reject this letter and took it very seriously. He wrote back to the woman and spoke to her with words of compassion and support. He told her to meet him at a then upcoming Star Trek convention. The two met, and James encouraged the young woman to pursue her efforts and dreams, to fulfill the degree that she wanted to have, and to not give up. He was able to uplift her situation. The two carried on an exchange of letters for several years. The woman got her master's degree and wrote again to James 8 years later and thanked him for saving her life and showing her that she was worth the effort. At a Hollywood press interview, James was asked about his career and his greatest role that he played over those years, to which James replied, "My greatest role was not on the screen, but was in real life, to save a life." The pride of helping that young woman realize that her life was worth living was the greatest role he played. You too may be a lifesaver. Take the time to listen, seek help if possible. Try to take them to the nearest hospital or call 911 if it is safe to do so. Otherwise, keep them engaged and talking. Let them know that you care. The download of their concerns and a few kind words from you may be the difference needed to bring them into perspective and save their life. They may feel trapped in their situation and they don't know what to do or where to turn. They may indicate that they are in unbearable pain, either emotional or physical. This is information that is helpful to you as a rescuer to help them. Sometimes there are people that are normally very introverted and closed off to others that will suddenly flip and become a social butterfly. They will start to engage with anyone and everyone that will listen. They become the life of the party. Here too, this may be a sign that they have embraced the idea of ending their life and are going out with style, doing all the things that they feel that they have missed out on. Often this may look like a bucket list, doing things they always wanted to do and saying that they feel freer than they've ever felt before in their lives. They may start paying for everybody to have a good time, becoming the life of the party, spending money wildly as if there's no longer concern about the consequences. These are all signs and conditions that we need to be aware of and to be able to recognize as potential signs of someone that may already be in crisis and about to end their lives. September is Suicide Awareness and Prevention Month. Take the time to become familiar with the material provided in this presentation and those resources that this presentation contains at the links. Also take the time to reflect on your own life and how you are feeling. If any of this material reminds you of yourself or someone you know, please reach out and ask for help, or step up and provide that help. If you or someone you know are experiencing these feelings, please call 911 or 1-800-273-8255 for the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. This is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week, 365-day-a-year call center that is there to help and to listen. You may be a lifesaver. You may be able to lend a hand or provide a lifeline. You may just be a shoulder to cry on, or you may call 911 or perhaps a family doctor, or you may just be a good listener. Can you see yourself being a hero and saving a life?
So what can I do?
The answer is simple. Love and care for one another as though everyone is a part of your own family. In the long run, they are. And every single life matters, has a purpose, and is deserving of our love and our attention. The stated objective of OHA is to achieve 0 suicides. We can make this happen, but not without your help and the help of others.
How can I know all the situations that put people at a higher risk for suicide?
The answer is that you can't, so don't try. You just need to know the more common causes and let your heart fill in the rest. Knowing the most common causes will help you and those around you. The most important thing to do is to listen and to care about each other. If you feel that someone is down in the dark and hurting, be brave enough to let them know that you are listening and that you're there to help and you're on their side. The next few slides will touch briefly on major risk factors that cause people to consider suicide as an option to ending their suffering. Accessibility to a means of ending one's life, historical events, and environment. These all may be contributing factors to putting someone in crisis and thinking of ending their life. Accessibility to a means. There are many times that normally rational people will just lash out and without giving any thought will attempt to end their lives at that very moment. Examples of jumping off a building, having access to a weapon, or stepping in front of a bus. This was the case with my brother Randy. He gained access to a handgun. His situation was so desperate, he put the gun to his head at that very moment and pulled the trigger. Historical events such as abuse, either sexual, physical, or even verbal, all of these events leave long-lasting scars that sometimes never heal. Environmental. With the onset of COVID, the wildfires, unemployment, homelessness, and foreclosures, it's easy to see how our environment can adversely affect us with life-changing events.
What do you mean by life-changing events?
Stressful life events like rejection of a loved one, broken relationships such as divorce, lack of respect by your colleagues or your peers, ridicule and disrespect, conflicts with others, kids out of control, dogs barking nonstop, just to name a few. The loss of a loved one, either by natural causes or by accident, is always a stressful, life-changing event that can put a person into risk. Suddenly finding yourself in trouble with an unwanted pregnancy, dealing with an abortion or a miscarriage, or finding yourself in trouble with the law. These too are life-changing events. The suicide of a loved one, however, is one of the biggest causes for crisis. Frequently, the suicide of one loved one is followed by the second suicide. Those left behind may find themselves unable to cope with the pain of the loss and will end their lives as well.
Are there any preventative measures we can use?
The answer is yes. We can do a better job with keeping in touch with our families and our friends. We can start by caring, listening, and becoming involved in their lives. Like first aid and CPR training, this class has shown you some of the signs and has raised your awareness. Don't just walk away or dismiss the cries for help. Step up and help. Keep your eyes and your ears open. Share the information we've provided with others and bring this epidemic situation into the light so that the goal of 0 suicides might be achieved.
How can I possibly make a difference and prevent a suicide?
The first step is to have a discussion. This is inside yourself. Knowing how you would answer these questions might make a difference in helping others, as well as better understanding and knowing your own feelings. Do I know of someone that has died by suicide? What would push someone to the point of ending their own life? Has there been a time in my life that I've felt that desperate? How would I respond to a situation if it were someone I loved? Can I see myself helping a stranger? And do I know where to turn for help? The second part of the answer follows. Provide contact information for helplines and list the help of others and family members or family doctor. As always, calling 911 or taking to the nearest hospital is a good, safe way to solve this problem. Ensure that any means of suicide are removed or safely locked away. This includes firearms or weapons of any sort. Again, call 911 or seek medical assistance as soon as possible. While the desire of this training is to save lives, there is likely no particular training that will provide this in every case. We hope that this will draw your attention to those around you and to open your mind and your heart to the issues and the signs. This training is designed to allow you, the reader or listener, to explore your own feelings and to open the doors for discussion, to break down the stereotypes and to replace the taboos with a feeling of safety and open conversation about this issue, in the hopes that, with this guidance, a safe resolution will be found. Every life is important, and every life matters. If you have concerns, don't walk away, don't dismiss them, and don't ignore them. The signs that you observe may very well be a cry for help. And note, it might not just be their life you save. Your thoughts and actions will be with you the rest of your life. If you're wondering how I know this information or why I'm doing this training, the answer is simple. I'm living proof that this works. In 2006, I was the one in the dark hole with nowhere to turn. I went through these emotions and many more. My marriage of 27 years ended abruptly without warning, and I was lost. I was at my wit's end and determined that when my money ran out, I too will have run out of time and would end my own life. I ran into a friend that I hadn't seen in nearly 6 years, the same day that I had planned to and prepared to end my life. I was alone in my house and ready to end my life with my gun. It was at that point that I prayed, Lord, please show me another way. It's a very good thing that I'm a safe gun owner and always keep the safety on, because I no sooner said the words than my phone rang. I nearly came out of my skin. It was Julie, the friend that I had run into earlier that day. She asked me, "What are you up to?" I told her she really didn't want to know. Her response was, "Yes, I really do." Those 4 words saved my life that night, and for the next 11 months, she filled me with the support and compassion needed to pull me from the deepest, darkest depths back into the light. Slides 32 through 36 provided in this presentation are additional support information and reading material to help you on your journey. Please know that no matter where this training takes you in the future, you are not alone. I want to thank you for letting me pay tribute to those I've lost in my life due to this tragic condition, and to acknowledge those who have stepped up and looked past the labels and the stigmatisms to show their love and to save a life, my life. Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Lord, and thank you all for the time and attention today. I also want to add a note of gratitude, of thank you to our safety committee, to Carrie Worley, and to those that have made this presentation possible.
For more information, please visit ODOT's Technical Services TLC Safety Committee website.